Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Two Peas in a Podcast with our glorious, glamorous hosts, as per usual. I am Katie Yeoman. Nice to meet you all.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Jessica.
If this is your first time watching our podcast, where have you been? But yeah, this is episode 10, would you believe? My goodness, I think we should have a little party or something. 10 episodes. And Jess and I'm in the UK, Jess is in America, and we are besties. So that's and we chat every week, and we pick topics, and we rant, and we share, and we go off on tangents, and we have fun, I think, right?
I have fun. This is one of the highlights of my week. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Absolutely. So Jess picked the topic this week, which I'm super interested to get into because we touched on it a couple of times in conversation, but we've never really gone there. So I'm really interested to get into this and to share our stories, basically.
Yes, today's topic is going to be on addiction. And both Katie and I have experiences with this in different ways, and it's touched our lives in different ways. And I feel like it's such a prevalent thing that's happening in the world that, yeah, it just deserves some kind of spotlight here. And also, I'm coming up on 5 years free of nicotine, cigarettes, and then a year free of marijuana. So I wanted to talk about it.
You can test the pot. She's awesome, right? I want to start by saying, and I know he's a very problematic figure now, believe me, but a long time ago, the infamous Russell Brand, I know everyone's like, but he was talking about addiction. And, one of the very few things he said that I actually agree with is addiction is a health issue. It's not a legal issue. It's not a criminal issue. And I totally agree, because I think addiction is, or certainly can be, a huge signifier of pain and trauma and emotional and mental suffering. So I think by approaching it in this space and kind of looking at why people have addiction issues, I think that we can really get people the help that they need.
Yeah, I agree. I think very rarely does an addiction happen just because you like the effects of what you're taking. I'm sure that there are very powerful drugs out there that feel like euphoria as soon as you take them, and so that helps. But I do think that there's something inside of you that's already seeking the escape from reality. I know with my case in particular, it was stress management, low self-esteem, a general not liking life or who I was. And so I didn't care about myself. And because I didn't care about myself, I didn't think to stop what I was doing. Before I get into that, though, I do want to give some statistics. I looked some stuff up, and I think that these are really shocking and eye-opening. Now, I didn't do global worldwide statistics. I am very America focused because this is where I live. And I think that it's important to shed a light on your homeland. So these are not for the world. This is just for America. In 2023, 59% of the people 12 and older, which is roughly about 167.2 million people, have used tobacco, alcohol, or drugs. And again, this is just in America, okay?
Yeah.
Alcohol leads with 47.5% of the population reporting usage. African Americans rank higher overall in marijuana usage, while Caucasians rank higher overall in alcohol, binging alcohol, okay? With 25.7% for Caucasians, 23% for African Americans, and 24.6% for Hispanics. Caucasians rank higher in the lifetime usage of cocaine, and this is actually for crack or powder cocaine.
Yeah.
At 17.6, and this is kind of a shocking statistic for me, and I want to say this based off of stereotypes, because as somebody who is mixed with Black and Scottish and Native American, there's a lot of really negative stereotypes about African Americans and drug use.
Yes. So
17.6% of African Americans have used cocaine. Or excuse me. Sorry, I said that wrong. 17.6 Caucasians have used cocaine, powder or crack form, versus the 8.5% of African Americans. Okay. And Caucasians, Hispanics are more likely to have a lifelong usage based off of these statistics of cocaine versus African Americans.
Yeah.
African Americans are actually more likely to go into treatment for drug usage. Now, I don't know if that's because of arrests being made, possibly, because I know that when you're arrested, you are forced and made to go into rehab in these centers to help you. So that's just something very interesting there. Now, this is where it gets a little bit darker. In a 12-month period ending on January 31st, 2023, the U.S. saw 109,600 drug overdose deaths.
Wow.
That translates to 300 deaths per day.
Wow.
Yeah. In 1999 to 2020, the U.S. saw 841,000 overdose deaths.
Wow.
Just shy of 1 million. 500,000 of those deaths were related to opioids.
Go.
Now, this is really interesting to me if we want to look at this from a political stance. The states that had the highest overdoses are West Virginia is number one, following by Tennessee, Louisiana, Kentucky, and Delaware. I think that a lot of people would assume California,
Yeah.
New York, these places that, Chicago, maybe, I don't know, these places that you go and you actively see things like this, but actually, no, it's some of the more rural states that are actually, and I don't know if that's something to do with healthcare and not having the proper healthcare, not having the proper avenues to reach out and seek help when you need it. I don't know. I have more stuff, but I'm going to read that later because that's all I have for the statistics as of now. I just wanted to give like an eye-opening for how much the problem actually is, like how big of a problem there actually is, especially here in the United States. I think it's something that gets swept under the rug a little bit, and it's not something that's talked about as much as it needs to be.
I agree. And again, it's because of, I think, a lot of reasons, but I think one of the key reasons is it's seen as something that is the prevalent with poverty, with lower income families, and kind of it's almost, I know America doesn't have the same class system as the UK, but you do see it in kind of, or it's supposedly the stereotype is lower class type of people. And it's seen as people who are engaging in criminal activity. So I do always think that it's coming at it from the wrong direction. It's coming at it from seeing it as this, like, almost turning your nose up at these people rather than seeing like these people need help. Nobody would, okay, very few people would choose to go into this lifestyle to an addiction level and for it to destroy their entire life.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. And I also think the lack of mental health services and the availability of it, because therapy is expensive. As people, both of us have been in therapy at various points in our life, we know how expensive it actually is.
Yes.
If you don't have insurance, forget about it. Okay. And I think that if therapy was offered, because not everybody's going to take therapy just because it's offered. Fair enough. But if it was offered, I think that more people would take therapy.
Yeah.
Because a bright light here for what I was reading through last night was that overdose deaths in the US have actually decreased since 2023. So they're at an all-time high and it's decreased. So I feel like people are wanting to do better and take care of themselves overall collectively. But I think that it starts with mental health, which is, what I want to start with one of my stories because we're going to kind of ping pong back and forth. And so I want to start with my big addiction with tobacco, nicotine. I smoked cigarettes since I was 17 years old. And the reason, and the thing is that cigarettes have always been around me. Everybody in my family smoked cigarettes. In fact, everybody in my family had some kind of addiction. whether it was drugs, alcohol, food, whatever. There was some kind of addiction it was rampant in my family. So because of that, I do feel like I have a built-in addictive personality, is what I guess people would say. But I always like told myself growing up that I wasn't going to smoke cigarettes. I had really no desire. And then my eldest brother, Brian, passed away. And I don't know, I just had the urge to go into a store and pick up a pack of cigarettes. And I was living in a very small country town where they didn't care. They didn't check IDs or do any of that. So I was 17. I went in and I got a pack of cigarettes, half expecting them to turn me down, and they didn't. And that was really the start of it, because I had something to do versus dwelling on what was going on inside of me. And I didn't realize it at the time until I eventually quit, that that's what I was doing, was coping, numbing out, using something to distract myself.
Yeah.
So I smoked and smoked and smoked and smoked. I smoked probably at my highest point a pack a day. At my lowest point, I don't know, maybe a quarter of a pack a day. But it was average about over a half a pack a day is what I smoked. I would wake up coughing up a lung. And I mean, like, to the point, not to get gross, people, but black stuff would be coming out of my lungs. My mom was really worried about me. And my mom has been a smoker since she was like, gosh, probably like 12. She smoked. I mean, when you're growing up in like the 40s, the 50s, well, she was from 58. She'd be rolling over right now. Girl, I was not alive in the 40s. Like, relax, okay? But 58, when you're growing up in the 50s, 60s, you get into it earlier. There's actually a story from my, not to go all over the place with my ADHD, but there's actually a story from my Oma when she was in Germany. She would roll cigarettes for her dad when she was 10 years old. Every 2 cigarettes she rolled for him, she would get one, okay? So that's just how it was back in the day. Anyways, so my mom was really worried about me because I had lived with her at different points and stuff, and she would hear me in the morning, like hacking, like waking up and coughing, to the point where it was bad. But that still wasn't enough to quit, right?
Yeah.
Had my daughter, got pregnant with my daughter, stopped smoking while I was pregnant with her because it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't care about me, but I cared about her. So her being inside of me was enough of a motivation for me to stop smoking. And I, in my mind, knew it was temporary anyway. I was going to smoke as soon as she was out of me. I knew that. I used to classify myself as a lifelong smoker. I loved smoking. I enjoyed the act of smoking, and I was never going to stop. Well, fast forward, okay, again, had my son, quit smoking with him, started right back up as soon as he was born. And it was difficult too, because again, there were cigarettes all around me, you know? So my spiritual awakening is what really kind of kicked me into gear with quitting smoking. I became like agoraphobic. I became afraid of everything. If you remember at that time, Katie, yeah. It was really hard. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of leaving the house. I was afraid of illnesses. I was afraid that any random thing was going to kill me. And I ended up getting an abscessed tooth and going to the hospital over it because I was so paranoid and so afraid. I went to the hospital and I asked them, you know, because my dental hygiene was okay. So I was like, well, what is the deal with my teeth? Like, why would I get an abscess? And he's like, well, are you a smoker? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, that can be one reason. And it just, something happened because I had read stories about, and this sounds so silly, but it was what got me started, okay? I had read stories about people who have abscess and their throats swell up. And you know how that's like my hugest thing. So I was like, I got to stop smoking. And I just decided to. And I know that it sounds really like cliche, but I feel like when you're ready, you're ready.
Yes.
Because I wasn't ready all those other times. And so I started one of the hardest things that I ever done in my life, which was quitting smoking cigarettes. It was not easy. At first, the first day, you know, but then the next day and the next day, it was harder and harder. I couldn't stop thinking about cigarettes. I had, for the first time in my life, had physical withdrawal symptoms. I was getting chills. I was shaky. I was angry. I was raging. I was sad. I was crying. I was scaring people in my family because I was just like, there was one point where I locked myself in my bedroom for like 2 days. And Ish would like knock on the door periodically and be like, Jess, are you okay? And I just be like, go away, you know? I would sit in the dark shower and just like cry. And I realized also how much I had like time on my hands, which was what actually ended up also jump starting me into doing tarot more and starting a channel, is because I had so much time on my hands. I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't want to just sit there and do nothing. So I decided to start doing that. I remember I joined this forum, and it was the Delphi forums for anybody that's interested, and it was about smoking cessation. And I remember this lady, and she pissed me off so bad when she told me this, but looking back, it was the best piece of advice that I actually got from her about quitting smoking. She said, all you have to do to not smoke is not smoke. Well, alert the media, right? Like, we didn't know, guys, you know? I was so pissed off because I was like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Thanks for telling me something I already knew. But that actually stuck with me. All I needed to do to not smoke was not smoke. And so that became my mission. Just don't smoke. At all costs, don't smoke. And it got better over time.
Yeah.
You know, it really did. And before I knew it, I was a non-smoker. I wasn't even thinking about cigarettes anymore. Every once in a while, when I get extremely stressed or maybe depressed or something sad happens, I'll think about cigarettes. There's every once in a while in the parking lot, if somebody walks past me and they blow a puff of smoke in my face, I'm like, oh man, you know? But for the most part, I don't think about cigarettes. And
Yeah.
cigarettes were my best friend. They were with me, besides, no offense, Katie, but they were with me through everything. When I was sad, when I was stressed out, when I was happy, when I just had a really good meal, you know, when I needed just to kill some time. Like, cigarettes were there through everything. So that is my story of quitting smoking cigarettes. You know, the reason I feel like it falls into an addiction is because of the withdrawals that I had and how long it took me to realize that I had a problem and how bad it is for your health. Okay, so that's that.
It's funny because I was a social smoker. So I started when I was 15 because I was dating this guy who smoked. And of course, when you're 15 and you want to be like grown up and cool. So he said, do you want to try it? And I did. And that was that really. But it was never an addiction with me because I didn't have to. That was the thing. I only really did it when I was with people who were doing it. And kept it a secret from my parents because they're very anti-smoking. My granddad had what we used to call emphysema. I think it's now called CPD. Literally would carry an oxygen tank around with him, and that was from smoking. So they were very anti-smoking. So I would literally constantly, like, body spray and washing my hands and breath mints and anything she found a lighter once, and I told her it was a friend of mine. I was hiding it from her mum, and she believed me because I was just like, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about it now. My last cigarette was in 2010. I'd moved into a house with the man that would become my husband, and we had a housewarming party, and a friend went in the backyard and she said, do you want to finish this? And I took one blast, and it literally, I thought I was going to throw up, and I put it out. And I was like, I'm done. I don't. And the thought of it now, it's just like I can't even imagine. I even thought it makes me feel nauseous. I can't imagine doing that now at all.
Yeah. And see, for you, it wasn't so much a crutch as it was a social standard, perhaps, because everybody smoked back in the 90s. Like,
absolutely. You could still smoke indoors at that point. I mean, like, it's everywhere. And I would work behind bars, and I was in, it was just what we did.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, I did hear that it's the nature nurture debate, right? So there is an argument that people have an addictive gene in their brain. So literally, if you come from a family of people who have addiction problems, you're more likely to have that gene yourself. However, if you are surrounded by people who that is your reality, that is the family you grow up in, that is your social circle, it also makes it more likely. So it's I don't think it's either or. I think potentially it can be both.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. And having seen cigarettes, I mean, there's pictures I have of me 3, 4 years old, you know, on my dad's lap, and he's got a cigarette in his hand. There's pictures of us as little kids, and there's an ashtray with the cigarette smoke coming out of it right next to our head. It's just how it was, you know.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like I, product of the environment, but that excuse for me can only last so long.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my auntie, God rest her, she passed away from cancer, lung cancer, a couple of years ago. And she'd been a lifelong smoker. And she said to me, you know, anybody my age, because she was like mid 60s, she said, anybody my age who smoked and still smokes, you can kind of excuse it to a point because we didn't know of the health issues. Nobody, it wasn't, not saying that the pharmaceutical companies didn't know, but the public didn't know. It was actually used as like stress relief and things like, it was like literally a thing. The cigarettes sponsorships and cigarette commercials and it was everywhere.
Yeah.
She said, for anybody your age and younger, there's no excuse. You know the health risks.
Yeah.
If you're still smoking, then like need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what are you doing?
Yeah, because it's really bad for you.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really bad for you. And it's interesting because I didn't even realize how much I probably stank smoking cigarettes. Now I can instantly smoke because my dad, he still smokes cigarettes. So when he'll come over and he'll give me a hug, I smell that old familiar stale cigarette smell, you know? And it's like people don't realize how much that actually lingers on their clothes and on their hair. And it's just, you know, one of those things.
It really is. And, you know, both of us, as we've spoken about before, are single, and it's really a deal breaker for me. I cannot date anybody who smokes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, that is something that I feel the same way because even though when I quit smoking cigarettes, which I quit cold turkey, by the way, I didn't mention that. I didn't use a patch or a gum or anything because I felt like, why am I going to supplement what I'm trying to quit with what I'm trying to quit? You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
didn't make sense to me. I was like, if I'm going to quit something, I need to do it cold turkey. But I was living with a smoker. My son's father, he was a smoker. He didn't like blow the cigarette in my face or anything. He was very, you know, he was as accommodating as he could be, meaning he went outside to smoke. But he would smoke in the garage. In the garage, we had a door that would open into our living room. So I would smell it still. It was really an energy of having to have willpower and discipline, caring enough about yourself not to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very, very proud of you because I know, I remember very clearly how hard it was. And
Yeah.
the fact that you came through that, it just shows how unbelievably strong you are when you set your mind to something. One would argue that's stubborn, but hey, we'll go with strong, right?
If it's stubborn is what takes me across the finish line, then that's what I'll do. You know what I mean? I'm going to get into my other addiction, which I feel like is a bigger one, but we'll talk about with Katie first.
Yeah, absolutely. Because my addiction, when you first mentioned the topic for the podcast, I was a bit like, you know, I say a social smoker. I've never done drugs. Like literally, I am completely naive. I remember being on a night out with a girl I used to go to school with years ago, and she said she brought her friend, and she was like, "Come on, let's go to the ladies' bathroom." And I'm like, "Yeah, girls together, woo!" And she said, "Let's go into this big stall together." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't care. I went to the all-girls school. I don't care. I'll pee in front of another girl. It's cool. Woo!" So I went into I was the last in the stall. So I shut the door, lock it, turn round, and there's lines of cocaine powder on the toilet seat. And I felt like I was in a movie. I froze and I was like, I have to go home now. And they said, have you ever done it? And I was like, no, I have to go home now. And they were like, well, how do you know you don't like it if you haven't tried it? And I was like, I really have to go home now. I was just running out of the bar.
See, me and you are completely different. Back in the day, I'd have been like, are 2 of those for me? Thanks, right? Sharing is caring, you know?
I was so wet behind the ears. So, but then I realized, of course, I have an addiction. Absolutely. I would argue that everybody has an unhealthy relationship with something. It's what you classify as an addiction, right? And my addiction, I could also argue, is one of the hardest. Not to say not discounting anybody else's struggles. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex. I can imagine it must be awful. The thing is that you don't need those things to be alive, right? My addiction, you do, because I have been addicted to food, right? And it has been the revolving door of not my entire life. My weight issues started, I would say, after I had the twins. It was really a battle. So for the last, I mean, they're 13 in a couple of weeks, God help me. But for the last 13 years, it has been the revolving door. And I was very much in justifying mode. So I would go, oh, well, I only have this, or I only have a little bit of this, or I don't eat that much really. But I was lying to myself as well as to other people. I was trying to make it so it was palatable, because here's the thing, right? If nobody sees you eat it, you haven't eaten it. If you're not sitting down with a plate and a knife and fork, you haven't eaten it. If it's liquid, that doesn't count, right? That's not calories and fat and sugar, right? So it's all these justifications. If you have something that's low fat or low sugar or low calorie, doesn't matter how much you have of it, because it's better for you. The justifications were insane. But I know that one of the key reasons for me, and I'm not going to go into the details of why, I mean, Jess knows why, but I was really, really, really unhappy. I've spoken before about the twins' birth, which, if you want to go back and watch that episode, brace yourself, because we both get into our birth stories and they're not fun or pleasant, but they're true, they're real. And after that, I had postpartum depression, and I was just really, really unhappy. And so eating all of the wrong things gave me that moment of dopamine, gave me that moment of serotonin whilst it was in my mouth. Whilst I was chewing, I was happy. And I was like, I mean, two typical things, right? I have a very, very sweet tooth, although I've noticed since I've turned 40, I'm going in more savory now. But certainly when I was younger, I was like, it was all about chocolate and candy and, all of that. And while I was eating it, very happy. The second I swallowed it, shame, huge amounts of shame, which then puts you back into, I need to feel happy again. And round and round and round you go. And it's really hard to break it. I am talking about food. I am on a weight loss journey again at the moment. I have lost, how much have I lost since so far? I think it's 25 pounds I've lost so far since March, which I'm very proud of. But I'm trying not to call it a diet. I pull people up when they go, how's the diet going? I say, I'm not dieting, because if I'm dieting, I have to come off the diet, right? Which means that I'm going to start eating again unhealthily. So now I'm doing healthy eating, and that seems to work better in my brain, because I have been in the revolving door of weight loss. I have been on numerous diets. Weight Watchers was one of them. I've been on calorie controls, I've been on low fat, I've been on meal replacements, like you name it. I've been Slimmer of the Year before on stage and got an award, and then piled it all back on. It's like, it's been a whole thing, but I know that every time I do it, so whereas you're saying, like, cigarettes were if you were sad, if you were stressed, if you were happy, if you whatever, food was that for me. So if I was stressed, I would reach for something. If I was sad, I would reach for something. If I was happy, I'd reach for something. And it's almost, and what makes it even more kind of complex and convoluted in my case is that my mom is a diet and fitness expert, and has been my entire life. She's ran exercise classes. She used to do 9 classes a week for 10 years, and like her Aries woman, she's mad. She's ran diet clubs. So, and I've helped her. She's got a counselling for obesity qualification, and I helped her with writing that up. I know too much, which means that when I do these things and I put the weight back on, there is that shame and that guilt. But I'm convinced that shame and guilt both weigh a pound each, and it's not going to change anything. So it is a relearning for me, and trying to kind of get my headspace in a place where I have better coping strategies. Am I saying that I've cracked it and I'm never going to slip ever again? I can't say that. And I think if you've got an addiction, you can never say that. I think you're an addict in recovery, but the addiction is still there, and it always will be there. But it's being aware of it and trying to just take it one step at a time, basically.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on taking the reins back.
Thank you.
For real. And I would say that I'm a firm believer that guilt is actually a useful emotion. I know that a lot of people think that guilt isn't, and people, you hear that too in the military, that guilt is a useless emotion. Actually, guilt, like all emotions, are indicators of where we're at. It's shame that's useless, because guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong.
Yeah.
And so when we let that guilt fester, that's when it transitions into that shame. Food is such a complex thing because, again, like you said, we have to have it to live. And I think that what's beautiful about you and what you're doing is that instead of shaming yourself and shaming food, you're just trying to develop a healthier relationship with food. Because, like you said, if you're on a diet and you're not eating, well, then eventually you're going to have to start eating like food is a bad thing. It's not. It's about what you're eating. And as you know, I mean, I can only pick one thing or two things for this episode of what my addictions. I have an addictive personality. And food has not been a healthy relationship for me either. Growing up in the South, growing up in a family where everybody, the women for the most part, are overweight. Eating your emotions. If I was sad, if I had something going on, my mom would fix me something to eat and everything was all better suddenly. So yeah, it's a lifelong struggle, I think. And again, it's your mental health and your sense of self-worth is huge for anything like that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of the key memories for me was, so I lived in the Midlands, which is obviously the middle of England, Clue gives it away. And my parents lived in the south east for 5 years, and they would come up and see us. Not all the time, obviously it's a long drive, but they would come and see us. And I hadn't seen my mum for a few months. And to the point that I kind of warned her on the phone before. I said, Mum, I've put a bit of weight on. And she went, it's okay, don't worry. It happens, it's fine. Not really letting her know. I put a lot of weight on. I probably at my biggest I've ever been. I don't know what it is in US. I'd have to go and have a look. But from a UK perspective, I was in a UK dress size, nearly 20. I was big, which is big for me. And so she came to see me, and we would talk about it now. And as she came up from the car, she said to my stepdad, "What the fuck has she done to herself?" But she was trying to be like, "Hi, nice to see you." And she bought me a onesie, which, was like those, like a adult baby grow, I suppose. And it was in a UK size 18. And when I put it on upstairs on my own, I could hear every stitch pull. It literally didn't rip. I could hear it go straining at the seams, and I couldn't do it all the way up. I had to do it from under my boobs. And I just stood in the mirror and sobbed. But I had to then fix myself and put the smile back on and be like, "Hi, look, it's lovely." But yeah, the shame was absolutely. I would never look at myself, my reflection in shop windows. I would spend very limited time in front of the mirror, especially if I had nothing on. I wasn't looking at myself. My relationship has been self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. Like, it's easy to go, oh, Katie's an extrovert, Katie's, a bit of a gobby scouse cow, whatever. On the inside, and Jess knows this, I have really had to work very hard on increasing those things. And that, I think, has had a knock-on effect in a positive way with my relationship with food. But it's been an ongoing journey, and it will continue to be an ongoing journey. And that's okay.
Yeah. I just want to say that your vulnerability right now is so beautiful to me.
Thank you.
Like, you're so beautiful, and I know that you're going to continue forward because you have showed such tenacity and determination, y'all. Like, honestly, it's just ridiculous how well she's doing. So yeah, that's just, and a lot of people, I think that they struggle with that. And again, it comes down to the root. It's not the food that's the issue. It's the root of why you are not loving yourself or caring enough about yourself to take care of yourself, right? Yeah. Tough issues.
It is, but we've got one body, and you can spend a lifetime fighting it and hating it and struggling with it, or you can go, do you know what? It doesn't matter where I go in the world, I take me with me. So you are your longest relationship. Other people come and go from, people leave or people move on or people pass away. You are stuck with you no matter what you do. Well, you have to try and go, I'm going to try and be kinder to myself, because I've tried hating myself and that doesn't make me happy. So let's try being kinder.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And with when it comes to like the low self-esteem, as you know, that's something that I've battled
Mm.
whole life pretty much. And I have been trying to get my mind into the mindset of feeling like I'm beautiful regardless of what my hair looks like, what my face looks like, what my body looks like. Are there things that you can improve? Absolutely, you know? And are there things that you can do to make yourself healthier? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you with where you're at that very moment. Because I know that as somebody who years ago lost over 100 pounds in a year, I still didn't love myself inside. Even though I was like 125 pounds on a soaking wet, the smallest I've ever been in my adult life, and I still didn't love myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I have a better actual like relationship with myself now, even though I'm far from that with my weight.
Absolutely, but this is what society does, right? I worked with a lady who used to be into bodybuilding and, you know, did all the competitions, you know, where they do with all the poses and they oil themselves and fake tan and all that. And she said to the outsider, I got compliments on my body all the time. She said because I was lean and I had, you know, the six pack and all these muscles, and people would go, "Oh my God, your body's amazing." They didn't know that her periods had stopped completely. She ended up with chronic pain, most of it, especially in her stomach and her intestinal area. She would get terrible acne. She was depressed. She had suicidal thoughts, but all people saw was, "Oh my God, your body looks amazing."
Yeah.
You know, and the idolation of skinny, especially, I mean, you and I grew up in the 90s. Oh my good Lord, the idolation of, like, it was anorexic chic, you know, it was like you could be thin enough. And then what frightens me, especially as we both have daughters, is you can see it coming back and it's really quite scary, you know?
Yeah, I was about to say history always repeats itself. Life is a circle, as we've talked about. And yeah, it is coming back. And it's one of those things where it's just like, I don't know, you know, that's why I really feel like mental health should be a huge focus
Yeah.
because that is going to help you navigate through any of the trends, any of the self-doubt, the self-esteem issues, you know, food. I mean, and especially like it's crazy too, because one thing that's trendy is like mukbangs, you know, eating like engorging yourself with food. And then at the same time, there's the standard to be skinny. Well, you can't have both, really, you know? And so I think that we're really as a human race confusing the younger generations, like they're confused. And I don't feel like they know necessarily what to do. They're more just trying to keep up with what society is saying is okay, which I guess to be fair, that's how it was for us in the 90s. If you want to go on a diet, smoke a cigarette, drink coffee. These are mood suppressant or appetite type suppressants. So I don't know. Okay, I want to move on because I know we got a lot to talk about still. I want to talk about my relationship with marijuana. Now, I know that because this is actually a drug, and I know that there's a lot of controversy around calling marijuana a drug and saying that that is an adequate addiction because I've had people tell me to my face that I'm full of crap. I was never addicted to weed. That's nothing compared to being addicted to heroin. I don't know. You know, I've never been addicted to heroin, so I can't speak on that, right? All
Mm-hmm.
I can say is that marijuana affected my life in a really negative way, and it was an addiction to me, and it was something that I could not do. So that
Yeah.
to me was an addictive thing. I started smoking at a very young age, and very similar to what Katie had said about her boyfriend introducing it to her, that's how it was introduced to me when I was 18 years old. I had smoked at one point previously when I was 16, but I don't want to get into that story. But I didn't smoke again until I was 18. That was when I started, and it didn't stop, basically, except for, of course, during my pregnancies. So it was like, oh, it's the cool thing to do. You know, it's cool. It makes you feel good. Sex will be great, right? And I was just starting out with sex because I didn't start having sex until I was 18 years old. So I was like, okay, well, if it can be even better than it already is, I'm on board, you know? And I don't know if that was necessarily the truth or not, but it was okay. But yeah, weed it started out as something that was just something fun and something social to do, and quickly became a coping mechanism for me. When I would be sad, when I would be upset, when I would be angry. And for me, stress management has been something that I have been, it's like a lifelong thing. Working on stress, working on managing stress, working on regulating my emotions. Back when we were younger, we didn't have all these neato tests about neurodivergency, autism. It was just a smack in the head and, I'll give you something to cry about, right? So nowadays, more people are being diagnosed with these things because these things are actually being taken seriously. I really do feel like I'm a little neurodivergent. I feel like I have something going on there. It's hard for me sometimes to regulate my emotions. When I get to a certain point, it's hard to stop. Okay.
Yeah.
I've gotten better throughout life, but at one point I would just get sad, get angry, couldn't calm myself down, would have rage fits, had an anger issue. And weed really helped because I would smoke it and all of a sudden I'd be happy. But then I would have the guilt of how I had reacted and that I needed this to calm me down and all of that. Okay. So it's because it was a lifelong thing from literally like 18 to, I don't know, like 38, 37, I think was a year ago I stopped. So it's been like a lifelong thing. There's too many instances to talk about, but there has been a lot of shame that was involved with smoking weed. A lot of worrying that people would know that I was high. And I know that people say that like, oh, well, you're paranoid. That's part of it. I don't know if that's necessarily a perk to smoking weed, that you get paranoid. But there was a lot of things, man. There's a lot of shame that goes into it. I mean, pinching weed off of people, taking a 20 out of my mom's purse to pay for weed. I mean, oh my God, the list goes on and on. Not being able to not smoke before important events when I knew I needed to be sober. I just couldn't help it. I'd need to smoke. Get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. Well, there's the weed. It's calling to me. I'll go ahead and smoke. Why not? That's the best time to smoke, is at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? It got to the point where when I knew that I really seriously decided that I had a problem, because I think that I always knew I had some kind of issue with smoking weed, but it was when medical marijuana was introduced.
Yeah.
Because then it became more available, and it was like, the state is saying it's okay if I smoke. In fact, I have a doctor that's telling me that it's good for me to smoke, that it's medicine for me, that it's helping me. And if I have too high of a dose, I should just try this. And if sativa is making me paranoid and anxious, well, then just try indica, which I've had people, which they've gotten blocked immediately off of my YouTube, who's told me, well, you're just not smoking the right kind. Block. Because I've smoked everything, hun. I've smoked sativa, indica, hybrid, dabs, edibles. I mean, I've done everything. It all has the same effect on me. So making it more available, and then the potency has changed, because back in the day when you would get weed, it was just like what we thought was great now would be considered trash. Yeah. I mean, they have upwards of 30-something% THC now. That's a lot. I know you don't really know about it that much, Katie, but trust me, that's a lot. Back in the day, we were probably smoking maybe 6%, 10%. And that would be considered good. To jump now to where we have upwards of 30%, 32, 35%, it's probably gotten worse since I've stopped.
Yeah.
How high do you need to be? How high do you need to be? Okay. It would get to the point where I would take one hit of weed and I would be out of my mind. I couldn't form a thought. I could not think. I was all over the place. Could not think, could not focus. Always worried that people would know that I was high.
Yeah.
Didn't feel smart. Felt really dumbed down and like foggy.
Yeah.
But I needed to smoke. Like, I don't know. It was like this had this hold on me. It felt very reminiscent of cigarettes, but almost worse, of like needing to smoke and spending all of this money on it, and then feeling the shame and feeling the guilt. And I have a strong connection with spirit, as most people know, but for those that don't know, I do. And so I would be getting these messages from spirit of like, you need to stop smoking. One of the things that you're here to do, and your generational patterns and cycles that you're meant to break, is addictions. And so I ignored that for a long time. Like I ignored that voice. I ignored that feeling, just feeling the constant shame. You know, for a while before I had my medical marijuana card, my mom had hers, and, you know, I would go and I would give her money and she would get me weed. And it just felt like I felt so guilty. I felt like there was like a point where like the only time I was seeing my mom was to ask for weed. And I was just like, I don't know. It just, I didn't like it anymore, but I was still doing it, you know? And I needed to be able to focus. I needed to be able to pay attention at work, and I couldn't. And so I finally just one day decided that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. Very much kind of how it was with cigarettes. I just decided to stop. And it was really hard. It wasn't as hard as cigarettes. For me, it was more of a mental thing with weed, which is what people say. It's not a physical addiction, it's a mental addiction. And I would agree. I would agree that it's the depression and it's the stress that you're trying to manage with weed. It's the escapism of I just want to not think about my life and the worries that I have. So instead of numbing out, now I was getting hit with everything, all of the emotions, all of the stress that I had been ignoring, all of the discomfort and disappointment in my own life that I had been avoiding. I was getting hit with all of this now that I wasn't smoking. And instead of deciding to smoke again, I was like, I'm just going to do something about it. So my mental health became a big priority, and I started focusing on that, and I started learning about, you know, how to cope with my stress and how to cope with my anger. And I'm by no means perfect at all. And if I get pushed to that level, I will definitely go off. Katie knows this. But for the most part, I feel like I'm a lot better and I'm a lot more in control. And I've had some really terrible things happen, and I haven't wanted to smoke again. Like I haven't smoked.
No, you've mentioned thinking, oh God, I wish I had a cigarette, but you've not mentioned weed once.
Because cigarettes, I don't know how to describe the difference here. The effect of the cigarette is so much more subtle than the effect of weed.
Yeah.
With weed, you're high, you know, out of your mind. And so I know that if I smoke weed, I'm going to go back to that anxiety that I felt, that fear, the shame is going to hit me. I'm not going to be able to form a sentence or think, be coherent. I can't drive. I can't go to the store. I can't do things. And this is somebody who used to smoke weed constantly. I had no problem smoking. I mean, guys, I would zoom down the freeway, blasting music, smoking a blunt. I didn't have any issues. It was just like all of a sudden I did. And I don't know if it was because of, again, the government getting their hands on the weed and changing it, making it more potent, whatever, but it just started to affect me in a really negative way. And so I had to stop. And I'm so committed to this that I don't even think I even told you about this. The other, like, I don't know, it was like 3-4 weeks ago, I was doing a reading and I was burning a frankincense incense. And I started to feel high. And I was like, what the hell? And I was like loopy and high. And I'm like, and I got done and I was like, it's obviously the frankincense, right? And so I researched it, and yes, frankincense gets you high.
Wow.
They use it for ceremonies. I did not know that.
And I didn't know that. I mean, I know they use it in ceremony, but I didn't know that it had that kind of effect on people.
Yes, it actually does. It gets you high. And actually, it's recommended by a lot of medical professionals as a mood like suppressant to calm you down. Burn frankincense, but it gets you stoned. So my reaction,
people like making notes for the podcast.
Hey, live your life, man. But my reaction was to throw out every bit of frankincense that I had in the house.
No, you didn't tell me that. That's crazy.
Yeah, because I felt that feeling of it getting me high, and then I felt like, well, just for a little second, there was like the devil on my shoulder that was like, well, this isn't weed.
Yeah.
You know, and literally like in that slimy car salesman voice, well, this isn't weed, man. You know, like this is something that's spiritual, right? And I was like, yeah, whatever, asshole. So yeah, got rid of that. But with stopping weed, okay, for me, it was a personal choice. I am not anti-weed at all. If it works for you, it works for you. Not everybody has an addictive personality. some people can use that as medicine and use it in a very responsible way. I was not one of them. And I was kidding myself and fooling myself all those years thinking that smoking, literally from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to bed, is normal. No, it's not. It's not.
As an outsider and someone who's been in your life for like nearly 11 years now, we've been friends. I definitely saw your journey with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, like I say, you have smoked, until you stopped, you smoked the entire time that I've known you. And until you got your medical marijuana, well, with one from us, you were using your mum's, then we got your own. I totally agree with you, because before that, I was like, because I have drunk alcohol, so there'd be times like Saturday night, whatever, I would be a little bit tipsy, and Jess would be a little bit stoned, and it was fine because it was none of us. It wasn't a problem. Do you know what I mean? None of us were like getting like to a place where we were in trouble with it. It was just like it was almost like a social thing on the phone kind of vibe. It was it was a bit of like lightheartedness. When you got your medical marijuana card, you like even because for the record, Jess and I voice note each other backwards and forwards every day, all day, because that's just how we talk. People are like, we can voice because that's how we are. Because if we have to type it, and there's been times where we have typed it, your finger will fall off. It's easier and quicker just to talk. And I would notice, like, you really struggled to hold the conversation. You really struggled to keep that train of thought, to keep on track. And sometimes even your words were not coming out clearly. And it was almost like then you were starting to get, like you say, more paranoid. You were starting to get more like you were really in your head. And
Yeah.
like as your friend, I mean, I can talk to you about it, but it's not my job to tell you what to do. It's your life. Again, I would just that we talk about that a lot. Is that I just support you in your decisions. I can not always agree with you, but we can support each other because we appreciate that we are our own people. But I did notice that there was a really dramatic shift, and I knew it was coming. I knew that you were going to decide at some point enough was enough. I was just, if I'm being honest with you, which this is a place of honesty, I was worried about how far down that rabbit hole you were going to go before you
Yeah.
turn around and said enough was enough. So I'm glad you stopped when you did, and I'm really proud of you for stopping when you did as well.
Thank you. And yeah, that was my whole thing, was that I couldn't focus. I couldn't form thoughts. I was like literally being dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
When I would do readings, which I've had people tell me, I didn't notice that you were high. But for me, I felt like my intuition was dimming and I was really having to reach to get the messages. And I remember talking to my mom and being like, I don't know, Mom, I feel like I have to smoke.
Yeah.
And her somebody who was an avid smoker and somebody who was like a big fan of marijuana. And she told me, well, Jessica, if you have a problem, you have a problem, and maybe you need to consider stopping, but then she would, bless her soul, this isn't any shade on her, she would still supply me with weed though, if I'd ask her for it. So it was one of those things where I just wanted to do better for me. I wanted to do better for my kids. I wanted to be able to focus at work, because at this time in my life, I was doing the Moody Tarot, and I was doing my other job.
Yes.
And it was like, I couldn't function.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I was tired all the time. I just, so that was my journey with that. And I can say proudly that I don't want to smoke anymore. I wouldn't go back to it. One of my fears that does linger in my head is if they make it legal and I could just walk into a dispensary and get weed, if there would be a bad day that I would be stressed out and want to go get it because it's accessible now.
Yeah.
So I do worry about that. But I think that remembering why you quit is important, which leads me to something else I wanted to read. And these are just some facts really quickly. People with addictions feel isolated. Addictions are a lifelong struggle. I
Yes.
want to cry. Addiction is a disease. Addiction can happen at any age. Addiction affects more than just the individual. Dependence makes drugs feel normal. relapse is not the end, which is something that I've told people that have came to me about their addictions, that if you have a relapse or you do something, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
We start over.
Yeah.
And that all of that one time that you relapse or that one day that you step back, it doesn't discount all of the work that you've already put in.
Absolutely.
And then last but not least, education is key. And I agree. You know, if you're not sure what the substance that you're doing is doing to your body or how it's affecting you, look it up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, ignorance is not an excuse anymore. We do have, and I know that you've got to be careful Googling stuff sometimes because Lord knows everything can kill you if you Google anything these days. But ignorance is not an excuse anymore. There's enough information out there. There's enough people to talk to that you can educate yourself. I will add to that. You don't have to suffer on your own. I know there's the Jess, you know, just because she went cold turkey and she's got that willpower and that determination does not mean that's the only way to do it. And if you reach out for help, that there's something wrong with you or you're weak. No. It's really, if you're addicted to something, then you, again, it's a mental health issue and you need help. You need support. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that, but it's getting into that space where you can admit, you know what, I have a problem and I need help. It's not, but, and there are people out there who will help you, but, you know, people are not mind readers, right? That's the thing. But to go, oh, it was obvious, everyone must have known. You'd be surprised. People who have addiction issues normally are really good at hiding it because there is a level of shame.
I
So,
think also that there's like a social standard too of like everybody has a vice.
yeah,
Everybody does something.
yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was going to circle back to, is that being a human being is really bloody hard, right? This world is not easy. Life is not easy. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of fear. And we're not here to sit in any kind of judgment or any kind of finger pointing or any kind of whatever. All we're doing is talking about our own experiences. But if you are struggling and you listen to this and you know you can see it's making you uncomfortable, it's making you triggered, it's making you emotional, maybe just sit with that. Sit with not only how it's made you feel, but why. And maybe that is trying to tell you something. And maybe it's time for you to be honest with yourself. Maybe.
And I think that also taking that, because we talked about it earlier, taking that shame element out of it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
No.
You're human.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I tell you, it's not about, that's why I come back to what I said earlier, it's not about money, it's not about class, it's not about where you live, it's not about your profession. It can affect so many different types of people. It can affect people who are sitting in places of power and government. It can affect people who are billionaires and millionaires and celebrities. It can affect the people on the street who are homeless. It can affect somebody who is your boss or your co-worker or your school teacher, or it affects that it doesn't stigmatize about who it strikes down. Okay, so it's just recognizing that, you know, we live in a world where things are more available than ever, and we also live in a world where there's a lot of stress and a lot of fear and a lot of, you know, anxiety. So be kind to yourself.
Yes, I agree. Well, this was a fun episode.
Well, yeah, I just think, you know, and there are going to be people, like, I'm sure, thinking when you got emotional that, you know, oh, it's okay. But at the end of the day, I'm never going to let you apologize for getting emotional. And I knew that my job in that moment was to hold space and allow you to speak. And I think it shows how much you care and how much this means to you. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
It does. Like, and that's the thing, because I have, you know, clients that come to me needing help with addiction. And I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified for that, but I can give my own experience and the advice. And it's something that, you know, it touches me so deeply because I know how lost and broken you feel when you're addicted to something and you can't stop.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And like I say, I just echo, and I'm sure people in the comments are going to echo it too. Really, really proud of you. You're an absolute rock star, and don't ever doubt that for a second, because I will get in that kayak and swim across the Atlantic and kick your ass, okay?
I look forward to
I've been ready for years. Don't make me do it.
Well, guys, that has been this podcast. We're going to go ahead and call it here, I think.
Yes, we will.
I hope that this has really been informative and eye-opening and helpful, and it has resonated in some kind of way. Even if you don't have any kind of addictions, somebody it's a good chance does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that doesn't mean to throw an intervention or anything, but just keep in mind the struggles. Ask how they're doing. Let's start with that. How are you doing today?
Yeah, be kind. And I have this thing there where I go, "How are you?" And people will go, "I'm fine." Right? Which because there's lots of reasons for that. And I go, "Yeah, but how are you really?"
Yeah, tell them what you always tell me when I say I'm fine. You have your little saying. Go ahead and say it.
Oh, fine is an acronym, which stands for fucked off, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So when you're fine, you are not fine. Okay.
Yeah. Imagine that coming back to you every time you say you're fine and being like, well, okie dokie then. Like, because
I hate that word.
Literally says that to me every time. I'll be like,
I'm sorry.
fine.
I hate that word. It reminds me of my teacher at school when she used to say we weren't allowed to use the word nice because it was such a blur word and there were so many other words that we could use. I feel that way about fine. It's just it's glossing over. Like, tell me how you really feel. Tell me what's really going on.
Yeah, and then I'll be like, well, sometimes we're just fine, Katie. Okay, so the next podcast that we're gonna do, I'm really excited about this. What are we gonna do, Katie?
We've got some juicy tea, right? Because again, this is just a suggestion, but I was like, yes, this is awesome, and I'm here for it 100%. We are talking about social media and AI. Yes, we are, and you'll know you want to tune in for that one because we got some tea in this place. Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're gonna hear some opinions about this. Getting very Italian.
Exactly, I'll tell you. My son's girlfriend's Italian. I'll be like, should we go? Stop it.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. We love you guys. Leave your comments below. Whatever you wanna, any feedback you want to give.
Yeah, as long as it's not too blunt and horrible. Otherwise, can't stand for that.
I'm open for it. I've cried on national television now. That's what I'm calling this, national television.
Sure, well, people watch it on their TVs, right? So yeah, sure, we're on TV. I can handle that.
All right, guys. Peace out.
Big love, and we will definitely see you on the next one. Bye.